אשיר על אדוני כי גאור סוס ורוחבו רמה בים בכוח ימינו עוזי וזמרת יד ויהי לי לישועה אלוהי אבי ארוממותך אשיר על אדוני כי גאור סוס ורוחבו רמה בים בכוח ימינו
עוזי וזמרת יד ויהי לי לישועה אלוהי אבי נרומם אותך
על כל הניסים שעשית לנו אבא ועל הנפלאות שעוד תעשה
ברכה נטויה שלא קצרה מלהושיע תן לנו לראות יושב בתהילות
לא לנו כי לך המלחמה ראינו מה קורה כשאתה מתערב
לך הניצחון לך כל הגבורה אם איננו נשואות שרים לך תודה
על כל הניסים שעשית לנו אבא ועל הנפלאות שעוד תעשה
ברכה נטויה שלא קצרה מלהושיע תן לנו לראות על כל הניסים שעשית לנו אבא ועל הנפלאות שעוד תעשה ברכה נטויה שלא קצרה מלהושיע אבל תן לנו לראות יושב בתהילות
לא וחי, לא וכוח, כי אם ברוח אדוני צבאות, לא נראה, נמשיך לפתוח, שומר הברית, מקיים ההבטחות. לא וחי, לא וכוח, כי אם ברוח אדוני צבאות, לא נראה, נמשיך לפתוח, שומר הברית, מקיים ההבטחות. לא וחי,
לא וכוח
אם ברוח
אדוני צבאות
לא נראה,
נמשיך לפתוח
שומר הברית,
על כל הניסים שעשית לנו אבא ועל הנפלאות
As a family ministry, Hebrew Hawaiian unravels the many hidden things that are shown in plain sight by this world. The two distinct bloodlines that occupy Earth have much to do with the condition the world is in today. Cain's bloodline builds cities, sets up controlling governments, extracts taxes from the people to live on the land, and is only interested in wealth, power, and fame like their ancestors, as well as building underground. The bloodline of Adam is reflected in the remnant, those who follow the commandments of the Most High, those who help others in need, who care for the helpless, the orphans, the widows, the homeless. They grow food and provide housing, physically and spiritually feeding anyone who is brought into their life. Hebrew Hawaiian also goes in deep and studies to show ourselves approved. As our family ministry, we reach extended family members worldwide, not just online, but through our cruise ministry, through our in-person Bible fellowship. And it is our mission as a family to encourage those coming out of the beast system set up by the Cainites and the offspring of the serpent. We are an online ecclesia offering prayer for anyone who requests it. We are joined in ministry with the Garcia family and sacredwordpublishing.com. Study with us weekly on Saturdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this channel. Shaloha.
Say
Announcement.
shaloha again. Apparently my mic disconnected.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's
Well,
back.
Shaloha. Did they let you know?
Yes,
Can
they
you hear me?
did.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys for letting Isaac know. I guess the microphone is having some issues. Hopefully, if you can
No,
hear.
no, it's not the cable. It was the system. It was
Oh.
the OBS system. It just disconnected for some weird reason. So.
Oh, wait. You might as well stay up here if you want to pray.
Oh, right.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, all that I just said, we're actually just going to start with opening prayer. Isaac's going to lead us in prayer,
Oh.
and if you guys can hear us, if everything is all good, just let us know in chat. We had some technical issues last week, so sorry about that. But this week we're going to be, I'll be teaching what I was teaching last week, and it's some interesting content. I think you guys will enjoy the content today. But yeah, thank
The
you guys.
revised version.
Thank you to our moderators again, is what I was saying before Isaac noticed the mic issue. Thank you guys all for participating. And if the moderators see any prayer requests that are in the chat, if you can just text me. I think for sure Terry and Tammy both have my phone number. You can just text me there. That would be awesome. Sherry, if you want to send me a message too, I'll check after we're done doing some prayer requests and see if there's any new ones. But welcome. You guys are all welcome here to our class. I'm here with Kaylee and Isaac. Noble will be joining us hopefully in a little while after he wakes up from a nap. So anyway, Isaac, would you open us in prayer, please?
Thank you, Abba, for another amazing day. Thank you that we made it through the week. And it's finally the 3-day weekend.
Yay.
But before all that, Abba, we thank you so much for just being able to learn who you are, to seek your face, and still having the ability to do so. Father, even when the other circumstances arise, I know that you will give us a means and a way to continue to try and reach your heart and your will. So as we pray these things, I pray that the lesson that you have from my mom would be amazing, my mama, and that you would speak through her and give her the words that you want her to speak. Above all these things, your will be done. In Yeshua HaMashiach's beautiful name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to get into some prayer requests here. Isaac has put them up here on the screen. And you can see this beautiful artwork that Noble put up here with 2 pyramids in the background. I don't know if he did that on purpose.
It's not on yet.
Oh, it's not
I have
on
to
yet.
Turn the camera. So.
Okay, so you can see this beautiful scenery of Hawaii. We do have a lot of pyramids here, actually. There's one like right in the backyard here of Isaac and Kaylee's house. Okay, so on to prayer requests. Some of these will be from last time. We did the prayer requests, but we weren't recording with the technical issues. So we're continuing. We're so happy to see Tammy George back in our chat. Welcome, Tammy. We're so glad that you're healing. You're feeling a lot better today. That's really great news. And for continued healing at home, there's been hundreds of prayers offered up for you, Tammy. We've been mentioning it during Zen shows throughout the week, and you're such a huge part of the ministry, Tammy. We just thank you, Abba, for healing, your healing power in Tammy's life. Also, for Zen, prayers for continued healing. Zen was going through a lot of health issues over the past 10 years, and I think that he's finally coming to a point where they're being resolved. And if you can actually hear it in his voice, he sounds so much more active and just feeling good. You can just tell he's feeling so much better. Also for our friend Tina, for a restored vision. Tina's in Wisconsin. She had sight her entire life, and then just about 2 years ago, all of a sudden, it just tunnel vision, and she's young as well, so we're praying that she has her restored vision. Kaylee, did you want to do the next 3?
Yes. Also praying for Christy Frost's restored vision for her dogs, as well as her finances. Christine's dog has diabetes, so continuous prayer for her. And Mindy is healing without sugar.
Yeah, Mindy, I saw her in the chat during Digital Readers Club, and she saw what Zen and I have been doing for the last couple years. Only just until recently, I had started adding some just natural cane sugar back into my diet, but I'd been totally off sugar for almost 2 years, and that's what Zen's going through right now, where if you can just cut out even just that one thing in your diet, you notice a huge difference. She's mentioning a lot more energy and just overall just feeling a lot better. So yeah, continued prayers for everybody there. And Kaylee, if you want to continue here.
Yes. Prayer requests for families with newborns and children, such as Time and Savannah Camp, Nathan and Chelsea Reynolds, Jake and Sierra, Lewis and Hilda, Will and Alondra, Isaiah and Bree, Justin and Joy, Kellen and Jeannie, and Leonard, Leonard or Leonard?
Yeah, I think it's Leonard. Yes.
Leonard, okay. Recovering from his heart attack and is currently healing. The other Lisa, aka Truth Seeker, and her daughter for their peace and safety.
Okay, and for praise report, we have Jake and Ciara, Luis and Hilda, Will and Alondra, and anyone else out there who is taking care of small children. All of these have recently given birth, these couples, to brought new life into the world. And praise to El Shaddai for the infants of Yeshua, and also for Yah Yireh Kol, which means in Hebrew, God who sees all. Our future is in the hands of Him who loves and cares for us. And again, praise report that Tammy George is healing such a large part of our ministry as well as Zen's ministry over the past few years. She's actually been with us since the beginning. A lot of you guys actually have been with us since we started teaching Hebrew class several years ago. And then we've kind of expanded into Noble was doing just a Hebrew lesson every week for about 2 hours, and then he decided to kind of incorporate Hebrew into his lessons instead of just focusing on the language, because you can always go back into our videos. We have our older videos up. If you want to learn Hebrew from the very beginning, I would advise to start with Hebrew class number 2. We had to delete number 1 because our technical stuff was so bad. This was before Isaac came on board, and I was trying to film it with my phone, and oh, it was horrible. We had like really old phones, and so it was just kind of a disaster the first time we tried Hebrew class. But class number 2, Isaac came in and he was helping us out, and so that one went a lot better than, yeah. We couldn't do this without you, Isaac.
I'd like to add another prayer request for the tech today. May our
Yes.
message be sent, of course, from Abba, and may it reach you guys in however it sees fit. So, in Yeshua's name, thank you.
That's a good one. That's a good one, Kaylee. Kaylee, did you have any prayer requests also that you want to add for you and Isaac, or for you guys? I mean, you guys, we hardly see them like this past week because they're so busy with their work, and we miss you guys. But if there's anything that you want to lift up in prayer that has to do with your work or your friends or anything, go ahead, and we can add it on here too.
Oh, yes. I'd like to add a prayer request for my coworker who's been sick the past 3-4 days. I think something's going around lately, and actually I was supposed to meet up with my cousin Jasmine, but then she fell sick too.
Oh my goodness.
And since she's a teacher, of course, she doesn't want to like spread it to her students.
Right.
So, yeah, something's going on around here, and we're just, whatever happens, happens. But may these people continue to heal and rest up, and however long that may be.
Yeah, that reminds me, Annette, our friend who is in ministry with us, she never gets sick. Like, maybe once every couple of years she'll get sick, and she was out for like 3 days this past week. We went over to her place and brought her some natural healing things, and she was just knocked out. I've never even seen her like that. But she's all good now, so praise report.
Yay.
Annette is healed.
Praise report.
Yeah, we were even wondering if we were going to do classes this weekend, but she's doing so much better. She's like 100% better, so praise report there. But we'll be praying for your cousin and for your coworkers and anybody else who's been affected by whatever this is that's been going around, because there is a number of people I've heard of too that are dealing with this.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you all prayer warriors. You can adopt any of these prayers. Thank you, Kaylee, for your help.
Thank you.
And I'm going to get into the lesson here. Isaac, what do I need to do here to get out of the screen?
So top left.
Oh, escape. There we go. Okay, I'll pull up my new screen.
Close.
So last week I had started teaching this lesson, but I'm going to continue and actually start from the beginning again. I'm going to introduce this new book that I've been reading with Noble together. I read through it myself the first time. It's a very thin book. You can see it here, and I kind of put this one screen up last week for those of you that hung in there with us for that long. But it's an extremely informative book. And this author, Robert Sefer, he also has a YouTube channel. He's an anthropologist, and so he's very professional in his delivery. He exposes so much, though. I mean, he's not an ordinary anthropologist, I'll just say that much. he exposes a lot about the New World Order, and he's written several different books, and this one is available on Amazon. I think it's about $15, but it's very thin. It's not even, it's less than 100 pages, this book, and it has some visuals inside it too. I'm going to be putting some of those up on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. But it really connected a lot of dots for me. When I started reading this book, I was just in shock. I mean, I watched some of his videos first. I would recommend too that, and like I said, I don't agree with everything that he teaches, but the main parts of it, like what he's exposing, is just amazing about the Sabbateans and what happened in the year 1666 that kind of led us to where we are today with the same so-called controlling families, and he just links a lot together. So I'm going to be kind of very careful in what I say, because I'm just kind of surprised that a lot of his videos haven't been deleted. I'm sure he's dealt with censorship though, because of the people who own YouTube. I don't think that they want a lot of this information out there. And so anyway, if you want to get this book, go on Amazon. You can also go check out his videos that he's got on this topic. I will be using some illustrations from his videos so you guys can get an idea of what it's all about, and I'm going to put in some of my own as well, because I'm going to take it back a little bit further than he does. And for those of you who were there for my presentation on the lost continent of Mu, I just wanted to put this map up there just because it really affected me and all of us as well when I was presenting it, just because, and Kaylee was helping me present this topic. Do you remember this, the lost continent of Mu, Kaylee? Mm-hmm. Where if you could look at where it's at, I mean, Hawaii is part of the lost continent of Mu, and there's tons of information in a book called The Lost Continent of Mu that I presented on several months ago. And also, it makes sense to me too, because even in this book, this author says that this is where the Cainites went, when it talks about the land of Nod that Cain went to. And then he says that this is the place of the origin of what we call Masonry today, or that particular cult. And they believe in worshiping like a divine deity, but then at the end of that book of the Lost Continent of Mu, we found out who that deity was. It was not the Most High God. It was the seven-headed serpent. And they believe that thing created all of us and everything that we see in the world. So you can kind of see that their twisted doctrine, it still has good information. I don't totally trust all the information that the author put in there from that book, just because he also gave his background of being a Mason, and not the kind of Mason that Brick is. We're talking about the religion. So yeah, and to connect that to this, and knowing that this is where this religion originated, it really explains a lot in Hawaiian culture, Fijian culture, all basically Polynesian culture, and how they all worship the same gods. Basically, they have very similar dances. They have very similar backgrounds and history. And in Tahiti, we went to Tahiti. Tahiti looks so much like Hawaii, and the people there look so much like Hawaiians. The only difference is they speak French, and here they speak English. So for the most part, although they have been incorporating back into native language here. They have actual schools that only teach in Hawaiian. So I think that's pretty interesting too. But you can also see it was like a death cult that they originated from this continent of Mu, and according to history, this continent was submerged with some gas chambers that imploded beneath it, and the entire continent and this over 60 million people who live there were all taken directly to the abyss. They were so evil. They were into all of the things that we see the what you want to call the elite or the controllers or whatever you want to call these people that run the world. That they're all into the same things as they are, as far as human consumption, all of their sick practices, the idolatry, very similar to what we were talking about during Digital Readers Club about Sodom and Gomorrah. After the flood, it seemed like all of the evil things, well, not all, but quite a large part of the evil things that were happening before the flood started happening again in Sodom and Gomorrah, and under Nimrod's rule, under those kingdoms when the Nephilim tribes began emerging again in the Canaanites and worldwide, and among the Edomites. And we're going to see all the links here when I do a summary of this book. Okay, so Robert Sefer, in his book, he takes us into this ancient Babylonian magi, and that they were actually the origin of what we call Kabbalah today. You can see this is a statue of a depiction of one of these magi who came out of Babylon. And if you look at back in history, you can see in the Bible actually who some of these magi were. And one of them was known as Balaam. And then Balaam's two sons, Jannes and Jambres, they were also the magicians in Pharaoh's court. So they were like very well-known pagan magi, I guess you could call them magicians, the sorcerers, whatever name you want to give them. And you can see here he's doing the as above, so below stance that you see in Baphomet as well, and other pagan deities and their idolatry. And he has like a depiction of the sun kind of behind his head. I'm not sure what that says behind his head here, but you can just see a lot of the symbolism going on in this picture. That's what I wanted to show. And here, here's some more about the ancient Babylonian, the Magi esoteric religion is what Robert Sefer calls it in his book, and how this religion came from Babylon to Europe, and how the descendants of these Magi and those that practiced this religion developed into this group called the Asiatic Brethren. And I think it's kind of interesting too that he mentions in this book that these Asiatic Brethren, they continued to use the same language that they used in Babylon, which it's Hebrew, and then it became Aramaic. We have what's called the Aramaic Targums today that came back with the Jews, or with the Hebrews who returned to the land. Basically the tribe of Judah and Benjamin brought that back from Babylon, and the other 10 lost tribes, we can call them the lost tribes, they are scattered worldwide today, but they were not part of those who returned to Israel. And then during the reign of Herod, and Yeshua even prophesied this in 70 AD, how Jerusalem was taken over by the Romans, and we're going to read how Israel became the nation it is today, even more recently in this book. So it all started, let's see if I can get to this slide here. Oh, this is the symbol for the Asiatic Brethren. And so you can see with this symbol, that looks kind of familiar. That should look very familiar, actually, the star. Where do you see this same star on whose flag today is a pretty good question. Guys, do you know? Where do you recognize this from? It's blue on a white flag. I'll give you a clue. It's, no, not your tattoo. Isaac's all showing his tattoo. Get that tattoo off of you, Isaac. No, but seriously, if you guys, I know you guys know. What nation today has this as their flag, basically?
Philippines.
No. No. Philippines is maybe the color. It's yellow, red, and blue, but not the star. Look at the star.
Israel.
Yes. So the nation, I call it the Rothschild created nation state of Israel, has decided to put this on their flag and adopt this, and they trick everybody by calling this the Star of David, although no such star existed. This is the symbol of the Rothschilds, and there you can see it's just two triangles, and you can see the as above, so below depiction here. But I wanted to show you this because it really does affect how things are taking place today on the world stage. So it began, this religion, when this Asiatic Brethren migrated into north to Europe from Babylon and from Scythia. I'm trying to think of the other name that they used, but a group of them decided to travel back to the Middle East, and they called themselves the Templars. And it's kind of cool. It's actually very interesting. I'm going to read in this book how that actually happened. But just so that you guys know, the Templar symbol is that red cross on the stomach. And if you guys know that is also a Jesuit cross symbol, you've seen this on maybe the ships like from Columbus. This cross is extremely popular among the occult. You can even see like they're wearing these helmets so to kind of conceal their identity. But these Templars were in charge of the money and the travel. And they called themselves the Templars because they considered themselves part of the builders of the Second Temple. We're not talking about Solomon's temple, but Herod's temple. And as we know, Herod, we actually spoke a little bit about Herod during Digital Readers Club. Clark had seen some pretty cool connections between some of the names and how it looked almost just like Herod's name. We know Herod was an Edomite, which was from Esau, because Esau was given Edom, which is kind of a large mountain just to the east of Jerusalem, and that was where Esau and his wives and his family all lived, and they lived inside the mountain. For those of you who don't know, Esau married into this family of Horites, and these Horites were from Seir. The Horite was like the first person named after the flood that was kind of connected to this tribe. This is a Canaanite tribe, and if you look up Seir, it means the same thing as satyr. Satyr is that half goat, hairy creature that we see kind of in like Chronicles of Narnia with Mr. Tumnus is kind of an example I like to give. And that's kind of what these people would have looked like. And they would have matched Esau pretty well because, as you know, Esau was born fully formed with hair, red hair covering his entire body, and even with grinders and teeth and just not looking like a normal infant, even though he was a twin of Jacob or Yaakov. Jacob was in the image of his father and in the image of Abraham, and Esau was not. And Esau also had a very specific angel assigned to him, the angel Samael. You guys can look that up and do some research on that one. Zen has a ton of research on Samael. He's mentioned in the Legends of the Jews and in other extra biblicals as the angel of death. And that's what Esau liked to do. He liked to go on the hunt. He did not want to study. He did not want to go to what we call the school of Noah and Shem, as described in the writings of Abraham. He wanted to just go and kill animals. That was like his thing, which totally matched with the Edomites because they were a very pagan Canaanite tribe, and Esau had children through these Edomites, through the Hittite and the Hivite daughters of Seir, not really daughters, but offspring of Seir. They were relatives, and they all lived there in this mountain. And so that's where Herod hired these Templars to, I guess, help to reconstruct the temple. They were more of like the spiritual advisors. They eventually became part of the Pharisees that usurped the Levitical priesthood, and the Essenes. I've done a lesson on the Essenes that were located, their community was this located near the Dead Sea, not in Qumran, where they attribute the Dead Sea Scrolls to have been found, but further down the coast, about 20 miles, is where the Essenes were located, and they became what we call the modern-day Templars. All right, I'm going to read some of this book here. This person is the focus of this book by Robert Sefer, 1666. This guy is named Sabbatai Zevi, and he was a messianic figure in history, claiming to be the Messiah himself, although we know that there's been a bunch of them. I'm going to read a little bit of background from this chapter 1. If anybody has this book, you can read along with me. If you want to get this book, I highly recommend it. I'm going to just be sharing certain parts from certain chapters today. All right, in 1666, an exceptionally charismatic rabbi and Kabbalist by the name of Sabbatai Zevi declared himself to be the Messiah. Born to an affluent family in western Anatolia, he was a particularly eccentric mystic who had attained a massive following of over 1 million devotees during his lifetime, roughly half of the world's Jewish population in the 17th century. Now, when we say Jewish, they're totally different than Hebrew. I keep telling Noble that. Those who were called Jews in the Bible, but that English translation should have been Yahudim, not Jews, because there was no J. There still is no J in Hebrew. And even when we go to Israel, we talk to the people there. We say, so are you guys Hebrew? They say, no, we are Ashkenazi Jews, meaning they come from Ashkenaz. They come from Japheth, not from Shem. The word Hebrew is from Iber, which is from Shem, whereas Ashkenaz was from Japheth, and Japheth was given the European countries to populate, whereas Shem was given the Asian countries, including Israel and the Middle East. So you can kind of see the difference there, and even with the people themselves admitting, yes, no, we speak Hebrew, but we're not Hebrew, we're Ashkenaz. Another link too that I noticed recently was in the line of Esau, because a lot of them were formerly Edomites, in my opinion, especially the leadership, because in Esau's bloodline there's Kenaz, and so that also could be one of the links between the modern day the Israelis and Edom, and why so many of them have red hair. That's a total European trait and also an Edomite trait from Esau. So you can kind of see how that would happen. I'm going to keep reading. His extraordinary popularity, according to historians such as Professor Gershom Scholem, resulted largely from the publication and availability of what is today called the Lurianic Kabbalah. Named after Rabbi Isaac Luria, this new Kabbalah enjoyed broad dissemination thanks to the invention of the printing press in the previous century. Jews around the world for the first time had access to occult literature about the deeper meaning of their faith, and the popularity of Jewish mysticism soared. After a particularly harsh period of persecution in European history, this proactive Kabbalistic philosophy, through an ancient mystical system, gave Jews a reason to be excited and optimistic. Part of this system included ways of interpreting the supernatural relationship between events and time, often through letters and numbers. The magical emphasis given to the numerological value of dates contributed greatly to the widely held expectations and hope placed on the coming of a Messiah at the time of Sabbatai Zevi's advent, the 18th day of the 6th month of the year 1666. And then they kind of breaks it down that the 18th day is 6 plus 6 plus 6, so there you have your 666 of the 6th month. And so who knows if he was actually born on this day, but he attributed to this being his birthday, I think for obvious reasons. Zevi was extremely charming and exuded an inviting personality, as documented by those who knew him. According to an eyewitness, Rabbi Leib Ben Ozer, you must believe that this is how it was. I spoke with people who ate and drank and were near him, who were not proponents of Sabbatai Zevi's, and they told me that there was none like him in stature and in the way his face looked like that of one of God's angels. And they testified that when he sang Sabbath hymns to God, which he did several times a day, it was not possible to look into his face. For one who looked at it, it was as if he looked into fire. Sabbatai Zevi was considered very handsome in appearance and also possessed an enchanting singing voice. Rabbi Leib Ben Ozer describes another phenomenon which added to belief in Zevi's messianic claim. He says, and this is one of the greatest occurrences, clearly supernatural, that came to pass in those days, and a reason for the great belief in Sabbatai Zevi, for it happened in many places that prophets arose in hundreds and thousands, women and men, boys and girls, and even little children. All of them prophesied in the holy tongue, which is Hebrew, and in the language of the Zohar as well. And if you research of what the Zohar is and Zoroastrianism, Zoroaster was basically Nimrod and Nimrod's religion. So it all ties into Babylon. Yeah, none of them knew a letter of Hebrew, and all the less so the idiosyncratic language of the Zohar. So basically they're talking about all these miracles happening and these people who didn't know any Hebrew are singing in it all of a sudden.
That's why they called it idiosyncratic, yeah, because only the idiots would be there. I'm just kidding.
That's a pretty interesting time.
Idiosyncratic.
So many rabbis of the time publicly attested to having had dreams in which Sabbatai appeared to them. This would be so creepy. Sometimes by the side of their bed. And when they awoke, they would profess that he was the Messiah. According to Professor Gershom Scholem, a sincere expectation arose in the psyche of many Jews, especially in Europe following the Spanish Inquisition, that biblical prophecy would be fulfilled via a Jewish homeland. Okay, so also Sabbatai Zevi, he was known to be like this manic depressive behavior, psychosis. He had ecstatic behavior with bouts of seclusion or depression. And some people were saying, no, it's just because this is what you should expect from a religious mystic. But what he was very much characterized, I'm going to show you another picture of him here. This is again Sabbatai Zevi. You can see all the Hebrew or Aramaic because it's the same characters, it's just different pronunciations and words. But you can see, it looks like it's in Hebrew because Sabbatai, well, at least Zevi is in Hebrew there at the top on that throne that this person's sitting at. But this is a depiction of Sabbatai Zevi and all his followers, and he's kind of depicted similar to Solomon here, where Solomon's throne was known to have been up these stairway that had like lions on it, and so they're basically saying, yes, this is our Messiah. 1666. He was born on all the right days and everything, and and these people they did not, keep in mind too, they did not accept Yeshua as Messiah. So they were still looking for Messiah even after their leadership had Yeshua killed. They were still looking for a Messiah, and so this person appeared over a century later, and they all embraced and accepted him. Now, but he was totally opposite of what Yeshua taught. You're going to see that in his teachings here. In any event, Zevi's unusual or socially immoral and religiously unacceptable behavior finally got him expelled from Smyrna. So he was living in Smyrna around 1650, and he wandered for years through Greece, Thrace, Egypt, and Syria. In 1665, his life forever changed upon meeting Nathan of Gaza in Palestine, the rabbi who persuaded him that he was indeed the Messiah to usher in a new age, and who would become known as one of his greatest proponents and interpreters. Sabbatai Zevi was convinced and formally revealed himself after considerable encouragement from Nathan, making his pronouncement in the year 1666 as to fulfill messianic prophecy. He soon gained fervent support in the diaspora, which is an area outside Palestine that was settled by the Jews at that time, by promising a return to a Jewish homeland, a message that was then well received. All right, so despite his, now this is interesting too, because notice it was more than half the Jewish nation was considering him as their Messiah. The other half, so despite his strong support and popularity among the Jewish people, the leading rabbis of Jerusalem rejected Sabbatai's claim as Messiah. They basically told him to leave the city or be excommunicated. So this Sabbatai returned to Turkey, where the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire had already allowed the Zevi phenomenon to unfold for several years. The Sultan did not initially oppose Zevi's religious claims, probably because those claims brought in so much money from Jewish tourism, so that they were looking at the money here. As Jews flocked to Turkey from all over the world, from England to Persia, Germany to Morocco, Poland to Yemen. And at first the Sultan did not interfere with Sabbatai's movement. The last straw came when Sabbatai publicly proclaimed that in the next year the temple in Jerusalem would be rebuilt. Okay, so he's making all of these like seemingly false prophecies. The Sultan offered Sabbatai Zevi the choice of either publicly converting to Islam, because if you know, Turkey is very heavily Islamic, or being beheaded. So the Sultan he delicately put it, your head or the turban. So Sabbatai Zevi, the turban was of course a symbol for converting to Islam. So Zevi, the supposed long-awaited Messiah, he denounced his Jewish faith and chose to wear the turban and keep his head, and he publicly became a Muslim, which I think is really interesting. So he's supposed to be the Jewish Messiah, and he's becoming the Muslim, but he turns that around. And he says, the Sultan gave him a job. He gave him this title, Keeper of the Gate, as his personal doorman. And then he converted to escape execution. But Nathan, and if you could put that together, Nathan was, at that time, he was like a definite depiction of the false prophet that's recorded in the book of Revelation. So Sabbatai's conversion to his followers represented the descent into the clipotic realm. So that's what he taught, that in order to have full redemption, you had to have the worst possible sins going on in your life, and then you can escape that. You can escape being sentenced to basically hellfire from that by coming out of these horrible and disgusting lifestyle, and then you'll be renewed. So that's what he taught. He taught that you needed to have an extremely sinful life, and then you would be redeemed. And the sinful life on purpose. Like, there were certain things that they had to do. We'll read about that in a little bit here. So his followers were dismayed, but those who continued to be loyal to the movement took it as a sign to also convert to Islam while secretly maintaining their Jewish identity. And the most famous of these Sabbatean cults, as they were sometimes called, was primarily located in modern Turkey. The detractors called them the Donme, which translates to religious converts, and it's a kind of a derogatory term. So Nathan's optimistic interpretation of Sabbatai's change of faith did not sit well with most Jews, of course, but it also explains too why they allowed there's 3 main religions that they allowed to come into the state of Israel, and one of them is Muslim. And you can see even on the signs in Israel, you notice that everything's written in English, and then below that they'll always have it in Hebrew, Aramaic, and in Muslim. So it's very interesting how that worked out. So according to Reb Yaakov Lev HaKohen, the current director at Donmei West, a Californian neo-Sabbatean organization founded in 1972, it is commonly held conjecture that Sabbatai Zevi's conversion to Islam was an act of cowardice that betrayed the Jewish people. However, this conversion was not an act of cowardice, but in fact one of the mystical zarim, or like strange actions, that he and Nathan of Gaza believed the Messiah was destined to perform. So in other words, they're trying to explain his conversion to Islam all of a sudden, and saying that, he's still an undercover Jew, basically, but he had to convert to that because they were known to be like the enemies of the Jews, I guess. And so by converting to that particular religion, he was also descending into the lowest possible form of sin, which is just so twisted to me. Anyway, so he held Sufism in high regard, and he has these this doctrine. It's another key aspect of Isaac Luria's interpretation, now known as the Lurian Kabbalah, is that it required active participation to set the stage for the arrival of the Messiah. He designed his new Kabbalistic instructions for liberating holy sparks to bring about the conditions that would set the stage, initiate, or directly expedite the fulfillment of Jewish messianic prophecy. In other words, instead of simply waiting for God to act, the Lurianic perspective expected Jews to play an active role in bringing forth God's kingdom on earth. This new European Kabbalah, unanimously attributed to Luria, was extremely popular at the time and is still the most broadly disseminated and used Kabbalistic system taught. The Kabbalah became a mystical synthesis between pagan teachings, which preceded the Torah, and that's why I went back into like that whole pagan continent of Mu, Gnostic elements of Judaism. Many texts pertaining to the Kabbalah, including the Zohar, say that the task is not to destroy evil, but to return it to its source. To put it simply, include the left within the right, and the Zoharic metaphor, or to uplift the fallen sparks in the Lurianic one. Okay, so that's a little rundown. That's from the chapter 1. Some of the other things that so even after Sabbatai's death in 1676, these different parts of his religion flourished, and they continued to indulge. And these are some of the things that they believed that would help them obtain full redemption, that they participated in. And it's very similar to like Sodom and Gomorrah, in wife sharing, religious sex orgies, adultery, and incest. Those are all like totally normal in their cult. The Sabbateans, the Dolmei, regularly held a celebration on the 22nd day of the Hebrew month of Adar, known as the Festival of the Lamb. They kept the exact nature of this celebration a carefully guarded secret until some of the younger members were finally prevailed upon to reveal it. So some of the younger members decided that they were going to talk and explain what this Festival of the Lamb was. So according to their account, the festival included intoxication and a rite called the extinguishing of the lights, which ended in total darkness, and that there was a religious sexual sharing of daughters and wives. From what we know of this rite, it probably came from Izmir, which is Turkey, for it borrowed its name and contents from the pagan cult of the Great Mother, which flourished in antiquity, meaning, Sodom and Gomorrah before the flood, and it continued to be practiced. So, in other words, just as a grain of wheat must rot in the earth before it can sprout, so the deeds of the believers must become truly rotten before they can germinate the redemption. This metaphor, which appears to have been extremely popular, conveyed the whole of sectarian Sabbatean psychology in a nutshell. In the period of transition, while the redemption was still in a state of concealment, the Torah in its explicit form must be denied. So that's why a lot of the rabbinic Jews in Jerusalem were saying, no, this is not a good religion. For only thus it too could be concealed and ultimately be renewed. So this is according to scholar Gershom Scholem, who's done extensive studies on the Sabbateans. He says, Sabbateanism is the matrix of every significant movement to have emerged in the 18th and 19th century, from Hasidism to Reform Judaism to the earliest Masonic circles and revolutionary idealism. The Sabbatean believers felt that they were champions of a new world, which was to be established by overthrowing the values of all positive religions. So this insistence of the radicals on the potential holiness of sin alienated and offended the average Jew. So it wasn't all the Jews. It started out as 50% of them. And it caused even the believers themselves to undergo the severest of internal conflicts. The Sabbateans attempted to justify it by citing the Talmudic dictum and that transgression committed for its own sake is greater than a commandment not committed for its own sake. So I'm going to get into the next leader that's in the Sabbatean movement. His name is Jacob Frank. And I don't know if you guys have heard of him. This is what he looks like. So that he took over this religion in the 18th century. He's the successor to Sabbatai Zevi. And here we have a picture of Jacob Frank. And also they saved his actual skull here. So that's a picture of that. It's a little creepy. And we're going to read of how this religion got more and more demoralized throughout those years here. So in Jerry Robau's book, The Untold Life Stories of 50 Jewish Messiahs, he describes Jacob Frank's philosophy. Although Jacob Frank was born 50 years after the death of Sabbatai Zevi, he deserves to be regarded as Sabbatai's true successor. He extended the paradoxical teachings of Zevi that the coming of the Messianic age had transformed sexual prohibitions of the Bible into permissions and even obligations. According to Frank, engaging in sexual orgies became the means to purify the soul from its sins. Debauchery became therapy. Frank convinced his followers that the only way for their special form of Judaism to survive was for them to outwardly become Christians, just as the Donmei had descended into the world of Islam. Isn't that interesting? You know how they outwardly became Muslims? When Jacob Frank came on the scene, they outwardly became Christians. So this is a little history on Jacob Frank. He was born the son of a Polish Sabbatean, so his parents were already in this cult, in 1726. And Frank grew up to be a heretical rabbi, so he became a rabbi even, who claimed to be the reincarnation of both the self-proclaimed Messiah Sabbatai Zevi and the biblical patriarch Jacob. So he's saying that he's reincarnated as Sabbatai Zevi and the biblical Jacob, or Yaakov. Frank created a new religion now referred to as Frankism, which is instigated by the Lurian Kabbalah and expanded on the redemption through sin philosophy made popular by Zevi. Jacob Frank asserted that God, the Creator, was different from the God who had revealed himself to the Israelites. He believed the biblical God was evil, belief widely held in Gnostic circles. And those of you who have communicated with anyone who is considered Gnostic or anti-Christian, I guess you could say, they totally believe that the biblical God was evil. And they point to all these times when he destroyed the Canaanites and saying, oh yeah, a loving God wouldn't have destroyed all these people. But we know better. We know that there was a reason why, because they were directly opposing and their religion, which is very similar to this one, would have just taken over the world. And it's so much easier to sin than to follow scripture. You know, like it's way easier to just fall into this religion. And so we know that this is a lie.
Well, that's why they have the saying, highway to hell and stairway to heaven, right?
Yes, exactly. And then they also say too, like the narrow is the path for eternal life, and wide is the path to destruction. It's way easier, you know, and there's way more people following the wide path, right, than the narrow. So this is more from Jacob Frank. Where Frank separated himself was by rejecting every moral law and commandment and declaring that the only way to a new society was through the total destruction of the present civilization. He insisted that child sacrifice, rape, incest, and the drinking of blood were perfectly acceptable and necessary religious rituals. So it did not take long for the Jewish authorities in Poland to excommunicate Frank and his followers due to his heretical doctrines, which included deification of himself and other controversial concepts such as a purification through transgression. The Frankists held annual springtime lamb festivals. We already read what that entailed. It consisted of a celebratory dinner, included drug use, sacrifice, nudity, exchanging spouses and daughters for religious sex. Frank totally rejected the traditional interpretation of the Torah. He converted to both Islam and Catholicism. And those of you, if you want to do a deep dive, look at where Islam came from. You'll find that the Vatican created it. He often slept with his followers as well as his own daughter, while preaching a doctrine that the best way to imitate God was to cross every boundary, transgress every taboo, and mix the sacred with the profane. And so here's a picture of his daughter. She was claimed to be, after Frank passed away, this is Eva, and she considered herself as a female Messiah after Jacob Frank. She was a piece of work. I'm going to read a little bit about her. So Eva Frank was his daughter, and she was called the Lady or the Holy Matron or the Mother, and served as a central figure in the sex rituals of the sect while he was still alive. After his death, she continued to run the sect in Offenbach and later in Poland. According to Jacob Frank, everything that has been till this day has been done so the seed of the Jews be maintained and the name of Israel not be forgotten. But now there is no more need for the commandments or for the prayers, but only to listen and do and go on until we come to a certain hidden place. Gershom Scholem famously said that people will always remember Jacob Frank as one of the most frightening phenomena in the whole of Jewish history, and was a religious leader who, whether for purely self-interested motives or otherwise, was in all his actions a truly corrupt and degenerate individual. And I'm thinking maybe his angel was also Samael, because, like Esau, because Esau was totally corrupt and degenerate as well. So this was just, and he's considering himself to be like reincarnation of Jacob. Should have been Esau. Maybe secretly it would have been Esau. Jacob Frank himself candidly summed up his own philosophy in a single remark. It is one thing to worship God and quite another to follow the path I have taken. Jacob Frank taught that in order to ascend, one must first descend. In Frank's own words, no man can climb a mountain until he has first descended to its foot. Therefore, we must descend and be cast down to the bottom rung, for only then can we climb to the infinite. This is the mystic principle of Jacob's ladder. So he's even incorporating and twisting Jacob's ladder to be this, which I have seen, and which is shaped like a V. Again, I did not come into this world to lift you up, but rather to cast you down to the bottom of the abyss. Further than this, it is impossible to descend, nor can one ascend again by virtue of one's own strength, for only the Lord can raise one up from the depths by the power of his hand. So he went on to explain that the descent into the abyss required not only the rejection of all religions and conventions, but also the commission of strange acts, which in turn demanded voluntary abasement, so that disregard of authority and the state of utter shamelessness, which led to a rectification of the soul, became one and the same thing. So I think that it's really interesting and horrific of this doctrine. This is like some of the worst doctrine, and it's totally mirrors that of Sodom and Gomorrah, of what it was like before the flood. Okay, so this is an interesting thing that Noble and I have actually seen this thing in person. This is called the Black Madonna. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Okay, this is in Spain. When Noble and I were visiting Barcelona, we decided to do this tour we didn't know back then what in the world was going on with world religions. We just thought, oh, the Black Madonna, I wonder what that looks like. And so it actually looks exactly like this. It's kind of creepy. It's in this place called Montserrat, Spain, and we took like a tour bus from Barcelona up this mountain, and this is actually the birthplace also of the Jesuits, where this statue is at. And so there's this long line of people going through this super creepy and dark cathedral that was built like into the mountain, so it was kind of halfway underground. You can even look up Montserrat in Spain. You can see what the mountains themselves look like, these three fingers sticking up. But so then we got in this line, and all these people were going through and like putting their hand and kissing this Madonna's forehead, and I was like, oh, what is that? And then it's just, to me, it's just like, what in the world? And this is where Ignatius de Loyola founded the Jesuit order, in this same place where this Black Madonna is. So it's kind of interesting. One of their idols that they would worship and do their sexual acts in front of, I guess, to get favor with whatever god they're worshiping. So anyway, just thought I'd stick that in there. And they also merged it with Catholicism through this Madonna. Here's a depiction of, in Catholicism, you can probably notice something right above this Madonna's head that's very suspect to me. You can see it's like the Illuminati eye, the triangle that we have on our dollar bill in that pyramid thing. And you can see the two pillars that represents Masonry, and just this female deity goddess. This is how they merged it. You know how they became like undercover. They said that they were Christians, but they would still be Sabbateans. And so Christians back in those days, a lot of times they were totally connected with Catholicism. So I think this is how they influenced Catholicism. And this is why, too, we have a Jesuit pope now for the past couple decades. There's the first Jesuit pope that's ever been in Catholicism, and that's where this religion came out of. Here's some more pictures of Sabbatai Zevi, and you can see this is a depiction of Nathan from Gaza, that false prophet that I was reading about, in Israel. And so everything was pretty much set up, and there's been many false messiahs that have come into the world. This is just one of the more famous ones, and we're going to see why, just because it's totally tied into what's happening in Israel right now. If you look at this one, in Nobles in my first Hebrew class, where we had an actual Israeli teacher, a redhead, kind of fiery Israeli teacher with a very short temper. I remember she was could be really sweet, but in Israel, they teach that these certain hand signs and this, you can see this Kabbalah tree of life. This is part of the Sabbatean influence again, and which came out of Babylon. Over here on the right side, you can see this Kabbalistic tree of life. And these hand signs, she was teaching us that in order they call this when you hold your hands like this, and this is modern Judaism. This is not even like Judaism as it was taught to the patriarchs back in the Old Testament. This is like their own stuff that they brought in here with this tree of life, with these hand signs. You can see it kind of looks like on Star Trek or something. Isn't that how they hold their hand?
Oh.
Right.
And so they call it, if you put your hands like that, you can put your hands out and make that exact hand sign that they're doing right here. And she showed us this in Hebrew class. She said, oh yes, in Israel, when the priests are going to do the Aaronic blessing, they make their hands like this over the entire congregation. And this is a curse that I don't know if they know they're doing this, but she was even praying over all of us in the Hebrew class doing this. And I just felt so strange looking like, wow, I wonder if this is, and also like that show, I've never even seen the show, but Mork and Mindy, like doesn't Mork like hold his hands like this and say something? I don't know. I've never seen the show. No, Mork and Mindy. It's like a 70s show or something. You can look it up and just look at Mork's hand sign with Robin Williams. But anyway, it's those in the chat, you guys might remember that. I didn't grow up with TV, but I just remember seeing some pictures of him standing there doing this particular hand sign, and now you know where it came from. Okay, so here's another depiction of Sabbatai Zevi and his crowd, and their gatherings that they would do is just so decrepit. This is kind of like what I just read about how the Jewish leaders, they called Sabbatai Zevi a heretic, because only 50% of the Jews worldwide accepted the Sabbatean religion. And I don't even think they call it Sabbateism anymore, because they've changed the name so many times, just like how they always do in the occult, so that you can't pin down what it's called right now. But we'll see exactly what it's called right now, actually, when I keep going with the study. So anyway, he fled to Turkey, became Muslim. Here's some pictures of the ancient Magi or the Aryan Magi of ancient Iran. These were some of the more modern day ones, and of course they practiced the same type of cult like Sabbatai Zevi taught, with the sexual magic. That was a huge part of their cult, even way back then. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. All right, we're here, chapter 3. I'm going to just do a quick review of this. I don't know if any of you here in the chat, have you guys heard of this guy, Adam Weishaupt? 1776 was an interesting year. If you remember American history, it's the year that America became a so-called nation in 1776, July 4th. So we're going to see how they use these numbers. In May 1st, 1776 was the formal date that Adam Weishaupt officially founded the Order of Perfectibilists, also known as the Illuminati of Bavaria. So he's the founder of this. Weishaupt was the son of a Jewish Kabbalist rabbi in Bavaria, but educated by the Jesuits who converted him to Catholicism after his father died when he was 5. He eventually became a priest, but defected and formed an alliance with Lord Mayor Rothschild. Okay, this is where the money comes in, who financed the Illuminati agenda. When Adam Weishaupt formed the Order of the Illuminati, he arranged the timing of key events by Kabbalistically arranging numbers in a manner which would add to numbers of greatest occult significance. For example, he chose May 1st because May, the 5th month, added to the first day equals 6. Weishaupt chose 1776 because the 4 numbers of this year add up to 21. Further, the sacred number 6 plus 21 equals 27, another number with occult Kabbalistic power because it is formed by multiplying 3 times 9. Weishaupt carefully chose this date because he believed that even the greatest plan would be doomed to failure if it was not carried out at the most numerically advantageous time. And we can see them doing this today with like 9/11, with all of their like false flags that the Illuminati plans for the world stage. They always use these numbers, so this is nothing new. The long-term political goals of their occult secret society called for the execution of the following plan. Now listen to this. This is 6 points. These sound very similar to what was up at the Georgia Guidestones. So this is their plan for the New World Order. Number 1, abolition of all monarchies and all ordered governments. Number 2, abolition of private property and inheritances. Number 3, abolition of patriotism and nationalism. Number 4, abolition of family life and the institution of marriage. Number 5, the establishment of communal education for children. And you know why that is, right? I mean, it's kind of obvious when I have everybody taught the same exact thing, even though it's lies. And number 6, abolition of all religion. So Barry Chamish, who's a scholar, he wrote a book called Shabbatai Zevi, Labor, Zionism, and the Holocaust. He says, the Rothschilds' goal was to control the wealth of the planet, and the Frankist vision was the destruction of Jewish ethics to be replaced by a religion based on the exact opposite of God's intentions. When these factions blended, a bloody war against humanity with the Jews on the front lines erupted and is reaching its very pinnacle at this moment. So we kind of see how things are progressing toward the tribulation, and it all started way back. I mean, even in biblical times it started, but especially kind of ramped up ever since 1666, and then especially, you know, like 100 years later, 1776. So in 1777, the Illuminati began to cooperate with all Masonic lodges, especially the Grand Orient, with the purpose of infiltrating them. Even the Duke of Brunswick, the Grand Master of Germany, said in 1794 that the Illuminati controlled the Masonic lodges. In time, the Illuminati won control of every Masonic order in the world. When Weishaupt became a member of the Grand Orient, Mayor Amschel Rothschild, the founder of the Rothschild dynasty, provided the financial backing for the lodge, according to the British historian Nesta Webster. According to Rabbi Marvin Antelman, Rothschild convinced Weishaupt to accept the Frankist doctrine and afterward financed the Illuminati. So in other words, the Rothschilds, they were all on board with that decrepit, horrible Frankist doctrine, and they convinced, in order to have funding, they convinced Weishaupt to be a part of that. He aimed to fulfill the Frankist plot of subverting the world's religions and the Zionist objective of instituting a global government which would be ruled by a king from Jerusalem. And I brought this up when I was talking to Noble about this. Who was on the front of Time magazine wearing a crown, looking into the mirror, holding a scepter, and the title of the Time magazine was called The King of Jerusalem? This was back about 5 or 6 years ago. It was Donald Trump.
Oh. What?
So he's already been given the title of King of Jerusalem, although I'm sure there's been many others. That's just the latest one. There could be more and different people later on, but I just think it's really interesting that he was already depicted as that. He's already been given that title. In Latin, Lucifer literally means light bearer. As its name implied, members of the Illuminati possess the light of Lucifer. They believed that people who possess it were truly enlightened and capable of governing. Their avowed purpose and goal was the establishment of a Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New World Order, which is, those 3 words are on our dollar bills already, right over that pyramid, that Novus Ordo Seclorum, or one world government, ruled by its capital in Jerusalem. So trippy, they're already saying that, I mean, they can just, their playbook is basically the book of Revelation. Like, they're just taking the stuff right out of the Bible and they're trying to make it happen on their time. They don't want to wait for the Most High. So Mayor Rothschild summoned 12 affluent men to Frankfurt and asked them to pool their financial resources. He presented the 25-point plan that would enable them to gain control of the wealth, natural resources, and manpower of the entire world. This plan included instructions on how to preach liberalism, to assert political power, initiate class warfare, dismantle and reconstruct all existing institutions, and remain invisible until the very moment when the Illuminati had gained such strength that no cunning or force can undermine it. Other highlights of their plan included the use of mob psychology, and that's what we see happening in the media, because the Rothschilds own all the media. So anytime you see like a major breaking news thing, always question it, look at the numbers, look at the symbolism. They wanted to remain invisible until the very moment when the Illuminati had gained such strength that no cunning or force could undermine it. Other highlights of their plan, they would systematically advocate and use alcoholic liquor, drugs, moral corruption, and all forms of vice to corrupt the youth. In addition, they planned to use the press for propaganda, to control all outlets of public information, while remaining in the shadows, clear of any blame. The plan called for the masses to be made to believe they had been the prey of criminals, and they would restore order and appear as the saviors. And we see all this. There's a book that Sacred Word Publishing puts out by Fritz Springmeier. You can read this, the very similar information from someone who has been part of this movement but came out, and I think that he was actually killed, but not after his book was published. I mean, after his book was published, so we do have access to his book. A key to their success was the infiltration of Masonry to take advantage of the Grand Orient Lodges, cloaking the true nature of their work in philanthropy. So you notice that all these guys, these super rich guys, all say they're philanthropists. You know, Larry Ellison says it. Tim Tebow says that their family's a philanthropist. I mean, they all say this. Bill Gates. They plotted to use this influence to spread their atheistic, materialistic ideology amongst the Goyim, which is the Gentiles they also consider as cattle, through systematic deception, high-sounding phrases, and popular slogans. Ultimate world government was the goal, through corporate monopolies, so that even the largest fortunes of the Goyim, which is the non-Jews, will depend on them. There will be the all-out use of economic warfare, combination of high taxes, unfair competition. They intended to control a sufficient police force and domestic soldiers to protect their interests. They would call this paradigm the New World Order and eventually appoint a dictator. So in this book, he actually mentions Fritz Springmeier, the author I mentioned before, and does some quotes from him. Adam Weishaupt founded the Order of the Illuminati on approximately the same structural principles as the Jesuit order. He had worked 5 years to develop or modify a system based on that of the Jesuits. So when entering this order, new brothers vow that they will never use their position or post against another brother. Through the network of Illuminati membership, Mayor Rothschild redoubled his efforts and his banking empire became firmly entrenched throughout Europe. His sons became barons in the Austrian Empire, continued to build their father's financial empire, to expand their political influence. And you can see them intertwined. They're under different names. They don't really go under Rothschild names to conceal themselves, but an example of one of the so-called daughters of the Rothschilds we would call Princess Diana. They infiltrate, they intermarry in with the royals throughout the world. The royals like it because they come with the money. In 1785, Meyer Amschel Rothschild moved his entire family to a 5-story dwelling he shared with the Schiff family. And his will spelled out specific guidelines to be followed. So basically, when the patriarch of the Rothschild family passed away, he only wanted to keep everything in the family. Everything, all the businesses, everything had to be just kept all in the family. No public inventory made by courts, so they would never know exactly how wealthy these people were. All right, so I'm going to continue on here in this book. That's a thing about Adam Weishaupt. We have another famous, you can see very steeped in Masonry here, who's written some books as well. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, Albert Pike. And this is later on. Let me see if I can find this part here. So the order led most members to believe the lower degrees of mystery they had reached were the highest. Few members knew about the true purpose of the order. Many members believed themselves to be working toward the improvement of the world. So this is like, you know, these are like the lower levels. These are not the higher ones that that the Rothschilds control and that the world leaders know about. They never guessed that the true or deeper purpose was to establish Novus Ordo Seclorum, a global program for world domination. So they basically went and controlled all the lodges, including the one that this person was a part of. Let me see here. According to Albert Pike, Masons from the start should be deliberately lied to, these are the lower level ones, and misled as to the meaning of the symbols. So this is what he says. He says, Masonry, like all religions, like all the mysteries, the Hermeticism and alchemy, conceals its secrets from all except the adepts and sages or the elect. So he calls them adepts, sages, elect. It uses false explanation and misinterpretations of its symbols to mislead those who deserve only to be misled, conceal the truth, which calls light from them, and draw them away from it. Truth is not for those who are unworthy or unable to receive it or would pervert it. So, Masonry jealously conceals its secrets and intentionally leads conceited interpreters away or astray. Here's another big part of it. So this is, I don't know if you guys have heard of this one. It's kind of gone crazy on social media, information about this and who's been a part of this Skull and Bones. It's a secret society based in Yale University. If you remember my study I did on the lost continent of Mu, this is actually one of their symbols, the skull with the 2 bones crossed below it. And even in the Christian church, you remember how they pretend to be Christians, but they're not. They masquerade as, first they masqueraded as Muslims, but they weren't. Then now they're masquerading as Christians or higher ups in the Catholic Church. And even in the mainstream Christianity, we can see the corruption happening in the mega churches. This is one of the symbols that I used to believe, because they were on banners that were in my Lutheran church, that this is the Chi Rho symbol. If you see that above the right coin, above this flag, and there's like a little serpent at the bottom there, it depicts the skull and bones. It's just like it's like a emoji, I think, for like skull and bones, an easier way. And it's also been popularized, like in movies and stuff. You see this on pirate ship flags, and it kind of makes sense though, because the pirates were the Jesuits trying to steal the gold basically from the Philippines. You know, that's.
Maybe I should bring my map up.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. You want to share that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you do that?
At the end.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't you do that? I think we have about what, half an hour left. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna keep going here. So this is the Skull and Bones. Let's see. This was another person. I don't know if you guys recognize this person, Helen Blavatsky. You can see too, this person was extremely into the occult and this is Helen's symbol, which it's just taken from the Kabbalah Tree of Life, which is totally alchemical magic is what Helen Blavatsky was really into. I'm going to read a little bit more here. We're in chapter 4. I'm just kind of skimming through this book, but I would recommend you guys get this book. There's just so many things that are connected throughout this entire book that help us understand what's going on today. So this is another famous one. And the Eastern occult teachings of yoga, meditation, New Age, mind, body, soul, tantric, sex, magic, that all came through this movement, through the Babylonian magicians. They're called different things, and even churches, they participate in some of these things, and cause they said, oh no, this is a great way to get closer to God. But when you're doing these types of positioning and just it's not drawing you close to the Most High. It's drawing you close to another deity, another entity that you don't want to have any part of you. So if you see any of this happening in the church you attend, either speak to the leadership about it, or if, in my opinion, it's just, I would just not go there anymore. They're going over to this other side that is not any part of what the Most High wants for us. So here's some more depictions of the Templars. There's a Templar ring. If you look at the Templar ring, look in the center of it. You can see that they're all connected. There's that star again, what they call the Star of David, but it's actually the Star of Remphan, or the Star of Baphomet. You can see also too how it's connected to the Rothschild. The Rothschild means red shield, and there's their shield on the right-hand side with that. There's their star again. That's why it's on the Israeli flag. That is the shield of the Rothschilds. You see on the bottom there, this is a little bit of alchemical magic where they speak to people. They have these little creations that they do through alchemy and these different containers. And of course the sex magic is also involved there. Put this up here. So you can see here's the people I've been discussing. There's Jacob Frank, there's Adam Weishaupt, and there's Rothschild that has the money to fund the whole thing. You can see even Rothschild is wearing the Jesuit cross. They always kind of betray themselves by their symbolism. Okay, I'm going to continue to read on here. Jewish author Dr. Henry Macau's controversial book Illuminati, The Cult That Hijacked the World, offers a straightforward summary of the Illuminati agenda and the unsuspecting populace that is being manipulated and exploited. Second drink. Most Jews are unaware of the Illuminati agenda. They are manipulated and compromised like everyone else. The Illuminati hides behind the skirts of ordinary Jews. The cult that hijacked the world is the tiny nucleus of Kabbalistic bankers and Masons based in London and directed by the House of Rothschild. Judaism has been hijacked. Originally, Judaism was based on Moses' vision of God as a universal moral force. Judaism today is based on the Talmud, which consists of the interpretations of sages, which are the Pharisees, during the Babylonian exile, 586 BC to 1040 AD. Generally speaking, the Talmud contradicts the spirit of Moses and takes precedence over the Old Testament. The secret society appears to be the organizational model for Judaism as well as Freemasonry, Zionism, and Communism, which they're all Masonic orders. Essentially, the leadership deceives and manipulates the membership with idealistic sounding goals. Only those corruptible and blackmailable are lit in on the true agenda and allowed to rise. So according to Dr. Macau, these elite bankers control the world's major corporations, mainstream media, intelligence agencies, think tanks, foundations, and federally funded universities that are responsible for suppressing the truth. If any of you have gone to a state university or even a private university, you'll know what I'm talking about. They only teach you like half the truth. Basically want you to memorize a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to forget later in order to pass their tests. Give them a... What?
And there's a bunch of books on people's perspectives.
Yeah. And you're reading all of these books, only books that they want you to read. You know, if you go to a Bible college, you do not read outside the 66 unless it's an assignment. And even then, the outside books are presented as possible lies. You know, like, oh, don't go outside the 66. They're constantly telling you that in Bible college. So it's very true what he's saying. He contends the promotion of feminism and favoritism to non-white minorities is part of an agenda to undermine the European heterosexual Christian character of Western society. So is mass immigration and interracial marriage, which he claims are designed to degrade and remove any unified opposition. In his view, most of what passes from modern culture, which is like TV, movies, literature, and politics, are propaganda and well-crafted social engineering. For example, a program for sexism and racism are actually designed to undermine gender and race. Guilt is a huge weapon for them. Dr. Macau continues. He says, "Today, British, American, and Zionist imperialism manifest the banker agenda for world government through the destruction of religion, nation, race, and family. This imperialism does not express the interests or wishes of ordinary English, American, or Jewish people who are being colonized themselves. The Rockefeller and Morgan empires are part of the central banking cartel. At the highest level, all intelligence agencies, meaning the MI6, CIA, Mossad, KGB, answer to this cartel, not to their own national governments." So Dr. Henry Macau, who candidly refers to himself as an assimilated Jew, claims that the Babylonian Talmud and heretical interpretations of the Jewish Kabbalah undoubtedly contribute to anti-Semitism. David Bay of Cutting Edge Ministry mirrors this sentiment. He says, "The Kabbalah is the keystone of all Western occult thought and practice today. It is the cornerstone of belief for all illumined ones," which is the Illuminati, "and is hostile to non-Kabbalistic Jews." Okay, so it's very interesting how they make it seem like the Jews are all like one people, when you can find out that there's some totally different beliefs among the Jews here. The Illuminati, which consists of the descendants of the Knights Templar and their allies, the Kabbalist globalist banking families such as the Rothschild dynasty, have always idealized the Greek philosophers, all while practicing aberrated forms of Frankist Luciferianism, which is hardcore Satanism. It was none other than Masonic leader Albert Pike who admitted the Masons worship Lucifer. And then we saw pictures of Albert Pike a bit ago. Some people may believe that free sex is progressive, with modern roots stemming from the sexual and countercultural revolutions of the 1960s, but in fact, the Sabbatean sects have fully indulged themselves in ritualistic wife-sharing, drug use, sex orgies, adultery, and incest for more than 350 years. So this is way, way before the 60s. Sexual abandon characterizes communist philosophy, a direct outgrowth of Sabbatean Frankism. Jacob Frank himself pimped his beautiful wife to recruit influential men. So it just shows you they're so decrepit, they're so corrupt. Adam Weishaupt, the co-founder, got his sister-in-law pregnant, which is just. Their illuminated secret societies perform ritualistic sex rites mirroring those found in the teachings of Socratic communism of ancient Greece. So like Socrates was very corrupt as well, which were later modernized and popularized by the teachings of Aleister Crowley, if you guys have heard of that name, and his sex magic. So Crowley spelled magic with a K to differentiate it from the magic of stage illuminists. I'm going to put this picture up here.
From outside.
So this is the artistic depiction of the death of Jewish messianic claimant Jacob Frank. And this looks very creepy to me, but he's like totally guarded. A very interesting scene here that's been shared with us. All right, so I put this up here so you can see that these particular hats, does this look familiar, like from Disney movies? What do you usually see? What type of people?
Wizards.
Yes, exactly, like Merlin wearing this type of hat. So the ancient mummies discovered in China with pointed conical headgear associated with the Indo-European or Aryan speaking Tocharians or Iranians. These priests or shamans were called magi, plural of Old Persian magus. These magicians were of a Caucasoid ethnicity. So it's interesting how even like, especially in Disney, you're going to see this stuff, kind of try to be normalized for children so that you think that that's a normal thing that you're going to wear. As a magician, you're going to wear this tall, pointy hat. And in my opinion also, too, just because it's from, like, probably Nephilim descendants, they're also trying to hide their elongated skull with these, because they also have a long, pointy skull.
I want to add something.
Yes.
Wizard, if you replace the W with the L, it's lizard.
Ah, there we go. There, perfect. That's,
Say it
that's
again.
English words.
You say it.
Okay.
Oh, Kaylee, say it a little bit louder.
Okay, so the word wizard, if you replace the W with an L, you get lizard. So elongated skull, right?
Is Tammy still in the chat?
No, yeah,
Because-
she is.
Okay, because Tammy and I had this ongoing thing if we're talking about like reptilians, she always puts, hey, lizard, lizard, and she puts the little icons after
Oh
it.
my god.
The little emojis, so we have a good time with that.
Oh, so she knows.
But she knows, yes. She's actually the one, when we did that super long show with Nathan, like 4.5 hour show that just went viral. She's the one that suggested that she said, Nathan, what do you know about reptilians? She was the one that asked that question that led down like multiplied
Oh my
rabbit trails there. But that was a fun show.
Mm.
Okay, let's see. So this is kind of interesting too. This is actually a picture that's in one of Robert Zephyrs' books. And this is also describing the occult and women. So born October 31st, ironically, on Halloween, to a German ballerina from Vienna, the medium Maria Orsic was leader of the Vrilinnen, the beautiful ladies of the German Vril Society. If anybody's heard of the Vril, have you guys heard of the Vril? That's like a form of like reptilian type of people, the Vril. It was really popular with like Hitler and getting like esoteric secrets and stuff. And so they dedicated their study and practice of metaphysics and the occult. The Vril maidens never cut their hair, claiming their long strands helped facilitate contact with beings from beyond. So you can see there, it's kind of a little bit creepy. But yes, so it's just a very interesting
That's
how.
why you see witches depicted with really long hair a lot.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's true. And it's actually a good thing though. Long hair is a good thing. I mean, if for women, they just use it for evil.
But you also notice that in hula, they encourage long hair too, right?
That's true. That is
Yeah.
true. That is true. But it does help. To me, it helps with your health as well. As female, it helps to kind of
Remember that it's
extend
not,
your antenna. I call it.
it's not wrong, it's what you're doing it for.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good way to say it, Isaac. Very good way to say it.
Or who you're doing it for.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hegelian dialectic. Have you guys ever heard of that? Hegelian dialectic. I'm going to explain it right here. He explains it in this book. So, all right. The Illuminati bankers created communism to harness the working class to their program of a comprehensive world dictatorship. The Illuminati and communists are Masonic secret societies that celebrate the same anniversary, May 1st, 1776, and share the same satanic symbols. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, this is where Hegelian comes from, his last name was Hegel, a 19th century German philosopher, devised a particular dialectic or method of argument for resolving disagreements. His method of arriving at the truth by the exchange of logical arguments is a system of thought process still in use to this day. To put it simply, Hegelianism dictates that the human mind cannot understand anything unless it can be split into two polar opposites, good and evil, right and wrong, left and right, etc. Now keep in mind, left and right. For example, when people talk about two political parties, labor or liberal, or like conservative or liberal, what they're actually referring to without realizing it is a thesis and antithesis based off the Hegelian dialectic. The only real debate that occurs is just within the minor differences between those two parties. Nothing is said or done about issues that neither left nor right are discussing. So that brings into play, why do we vote here in this country? You're going to vote for the left, you're going to vote for the right, you're going to vote for Republican. They did this on purpose to make it seem like we have a choice, to make it seem like we have power of who to vote for. And that's the Hegelian dialectic right here at its finest. This is why I've never voted, actually. We don't really vote now, do we, hon?
Vote? I vote we eat.
Noble's joining us now. How are you feeling?
Rested.
Okay, good.
Isaac
Good.
fed me, so I feel better.
Oh, good. Okay, very good. We're talking about Hegelian dialectic here.
Oh, okay.
Another form of the Hegelian dialectic is problem, reaction, then solution. Almost all major events in history employ the Hegelian dialectic. And this is something to look for if you want to identify the false flags going on in the media today. So they have the problem, they manufacture a crisis or take advantage of one already in place in order to get the desired crisis, followed by reaction of public outcry where the public demands a solution. And we saw this during the last several years during the pandemic, which has been predetermined from the beginning. Dennis Healey, the former British Secretary of Defense, once said, "World events do not occur by accident. They are made to happen, whether it is to do with national issues or commerce. Most of them are staged and managed by those who hold the purse string," meaning the Rothschilds. And it's convenient because they own the media too. So of course they're going to create these events similar to like the Baltimore Bridge event, the things that have happened recently. And then they're going to manipulate it, and then they look like they're the saviors by creating the solution. In an article titled "British Masonry Covets Israel," Jewish Israeli author Barry Shamish claims there would be no modern state of Israel without British Masonry. In the 1860s, the British Israelite movement was initiated from within Masonry. Its goal was to establish a Jewish Masonic state in the Turkish province of Palestine. Initially, British Jewish Masonic families like the Rothschilds and the Montefiores provided the capital to build the infrastructure for the anticipated wave of immigration. However, luring the Jews to Israel was proving difficult. They liked European life too much to abandon it. So Europe was turned into a nightmare for the Jews. So in other words, they wanted to have this nation that they were buying, this piece of land, they wanted to have it populated by Jews. The majority of the Jews lived in Europe, especially in Poland, Austria, Germany, and they had to figure out a way to get them to move. So in other words, they had to create a horrible situation so that they would want to leave where they're living. In 1891, the Labour Leader newspaper of Britain published the following statement on the subject of the Rothschilds. "This blood-sucking crew has been the cause of untold mischief and misery in Europe during the present century and has piled up its prodigious wealth, chiefly through fomenting wars between states which ought never to have quarreled. Whenever there is trouble in Europe, wherever rumors of war circulate and men's minds are distraught with fear of change and calamity, you may be sure that a hook-nosed Rothschild is at his game somewhere near the region of the disturbance." So comments like this worried the Rothschilds, and toward the end of the 1800s, they purchased the Reuters news agency that they could have control of the media, and they had control of 3 European news agencies in Germany, England, and France. So Jacob Schiff set up the Anti-Defamation League in the United States. He formed this organization to slander anyone who questioned or challenged the Rothschild global conspiracy as anti-Semitic. So this is where that Semitism thing comes from. From that time on, the media rarely reported on them because they owned the media. So Congress voted on their Federal Reserve Act. This is also in Fritz Springmeier's book, to create the Federal Reserve so they could control the money in the United States. And then in 1917, Chaim Weizmann became president of the British Zionist Federation. He worked with United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour. Does that sound familiar? To obtain the milestone Balfour Declaration, which stated in writing that in exchange for bringing America into the war against Germany, the British would give Palestine to the Rothschild Zionists. So now they've changed their name again. Instead of Sabbateans, they're now Zionists. His Majesty's government view with the favor the establishment of Palestine a national home for the Jewish people, used their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. And then the press published the letter 1 week later, and the Balfour Declaration was later incorporated into the peace treaty with the Ottoman Empire and the Mandate for Palestine. The original document is kept in the British Library. The reason America entered World War I, directly leading to the defeat and destruction of Germany, was due to a formal agreement between Britain and Mr. Rothschild, which promised Palestine as a new Jewish homeland in exchange for America's entry into the war. So in other words, they made a deal. They said, okay, we will help to establish your homeland, but you got to get the United States enter into the war because they're the military arm, basically. Then they had the Versailles Peace Conference. Let me see if there's anything else here I need to put up. Oh, I'm going to put up this other one. This is actually one of my last slides, but just so that you guys can know that this person is most recently a part of a total Sabbatean Zionist, this person, but also into the magic thing. And you can see the different symbolism there on this person's outfits. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. The Germans, okay, so let me see here. A delegation of 117 Zionists, headed up by Bernard Baruch, brought up the subject of Palestine, and this is in the Versailles Conference. At this point, the defeated Germans realized why America had turned against them politically and militarily, and under whose influence, namely the Rothschilds. So the Germans felt the Zionists had betrayed them. This was because at the time the Rothschilds made this deal with Britain for Palestine, Germany was the friendliest country in the world toward the Jews. The German Emancipation Edict of 1822 guaranteed Jews in Germany all the civil rights enjoyed by the Germans. Germany was also the only country in Europe which did not place restrictions on Jews. They even gave them refuge when they had to flee Russia after their first attempted communist coup failed there in 1905. So you can see why the Germans were just like, what is going on? Why are all these people turning against us? We're the only nation on earth that's been nice to them. So here's a speech. I wanted to end with this speech. This is a speech given. It's a shortened speech. Born in 1890, Benjamin Friedman was a successful Jewish businessman of New York City who was at one time the principal owner of the Woodbury Soap Company. So he's a business owner. In 1945, he spent the great preponderance of his considerable fortune, $2.5 million, that was a ton of money back then, exposing the tyranny which had enveloped the United States. Mr. Friedman was personally acquainted with Bernard Baruch, Samuel Untermeyer, Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Joseph Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and many more movers and shakers of our times. The following shortened excerpt is from a speech given by Mr. Friedman before a packed audience at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. in 1961. Okay, listen to this. This is very telling. So this is what Friedman's speech was. World War I broke out in the summer of 1914. Within 2 years, Germany had won that war. Not alone won it nominally, but won it actually. The German submarines, which were a surprise to the world, had swept all the convoys from the Atlantic Ocean, and Great Britain stood there without ammunition for her soldiers, stood there with 1 week's food supply facing her, and after that, starvation. At that time, the French army had mutinied. They lost 600,000 of the flower of French youth in the defense of Verdun on the Somme. The Russian army was defecting. They were picking up their toys and going home. They didn't want to play war anymore. The Italian army collapsed. Not a shot had been fired on the German soil. Not an enemy soldier crossed the border into Germany. And yet here was Germany offering England peace terms. They offered England a negotiated peace on what the lawyers call a status quo ante basis. That means, let's call the war off and let everything be as it was before the war started. So England, in the summer of 1916, was considering that seriously. They had no choice. It was either accepting this negotiated peace that Germany was offering them or going on with the war and being totally defeated. While all that was going on, the Zionists in Germany went to the British War Cabinet, and I'm going to be brief because this is a long story, but I have all the documents to prove any statement I make if anyone is curious. This is from the speaker, or doesn't believe I'm saying is possible. The Zionists went to the British War Cabinet and they said, look here, you can yet win this war. You don't have to give up. You don't have to accept the negotiated peace offered to you now by Germany. You can win this war if the United States will come in as your ally. The United States was not in the war at that time. We were fresh. We were young. We were rich. We were powerful. The Zionists told England, we will guarantee to bring the United States into the war as your ally, to fight with you on your side if you will promise us Palestine after you win the war. In other words, they made this deal. We'll get you United States into your war as your ally. The price you must pay us is Palestine after you have won the war and defeated Germany. Now, England had as much right to promise Palestine to anybody as the United States would have to promise Japan to Ireland for any reason whatsoever. It's absurd that Great Britain, that never had any connection or interest or any right in what is known as Palestine should offer it as coin to the realm to pay the Zionists for bringing the U.S. into the war. They made that promise, and shortly after, the United States, which was almost totally pro-German at the time, because the newspapers here were controlled by the Jews, the bankers were Jews, the media of mass communications in this country was controlled by Jews, and they were pro-German because their people, in the majority of cases, came from Germany, and they wanted to see Germany lick the Tsar. At that time, everything changed, like the traffic light that changes from red to green, where the newspapers had been all pro-German, where they'd been telling the people of the difficulties Germany was having fighting Great Britain. All of a sudden, the Germans were no good. They were villains. They were Huns. They were shooting Red Cross nurses. This is from the media. They were cutting off babies' hands. They were no good. Well, shortly after that, Mr. Wilson declared war on Germany. And that's how the U.S. got into the war. We had no more right to be in it than we have to be on the moon. We went in there. We were railroaded into it. We were suckered into that war so the Zionists of the world could obtain Palestine. That is something the people in the United States have never been told. They never knew why we went into World War I. And after we got into the war, the Zionists went to Great Britain and they said, well, we performed our part of the agreement. Let's have something in writing that shows you are going to keep your bargain and give us Palestine after you win the war. So that was the Balfour Declaration. The United States went into the war. They crushed Germany. We went in there. Now, when the war was ended, the Germans went to Paris, the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. There were 117 Jews there as a delegation representing the Jews and headed by Bernard Baruch. I was there. I ought to know. This is from the speaker. And he says the Jews at that peace conference, when they were cutting up Germany and parceling out Europe to all these nations, the Jews said, how about Palestine for us? And they produced for the first time, to the knowledge of the Germans, the Balfour Declaration. So the Germans, for the first time, realized, oh, that was the game. That's why the U.S. came in the war. And they realized for the first time that they were defeated. They suffered the terrific reparation that was slapped on them because the Zionists wanted Palestine and they were determined to get it at any cost. So that's part of his speech. I'm going to end with that. That's not the end of the book, though. So I would like to encourage you guys to buy this book. I'm done teaching. And Kaylee's got something that she wants to share. She found this today. You can explain where you found this and how much it costs.
Okay, hold on, guys. The camera's not pointed that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So Isaac's going to set this up with the camera so you guys can see this cool thing that Kaylee got.
Shall I point the camera where you're at? Back there.
Turning. That way.
This way? Not to me. Yeah, there you go.
And here's Kaylee. She's got this cool thing that she found where?
Do you mind holding? Oh.
Yeah.
I got this from a thrift store. It's called Savers, and it's actually huge. It's a sheet, and someone actually like hand
This is your part.
hand embroidered them.
Yeah.
I guess it is.
Yeah.
You can pan it over.
Luzon!
This is so neat.
The
This is-
Philippines.
You guys recognize the Philippines there. It's so beautiful the way that the person embroidered it on here.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
it's a very cool addition to your collection of Filipino souvenirs.
Yes. The
It's so
culture's
cool.
there.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you look at it too, I always think that the Philippines looks so cool. It kind of looks like a person. Like you can see like a head right there and the arm reaching out there, and this is like the pelvis area, the hips, and then there's the spine coming down the middle. Do you see that? The spine kind of coming down the
He's
middle.
got an elongated skull.
Yeah, like with an elongated skull, exactly.
It's a penis.
There, like you see the, like the, no, this is
Is
like
the
the
person
chin.
sticking a middle finger?
This
I'm
would
just
be,
kidding.
that would be like an arm reaching out, kind of, and this would be like the chin, and then the head is like all right here, and then the spine down here, and then this is like the hips.
All right.
Yeah.
Good imagination.
Anyway.
Okay, that's what I want to show.
But yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Good one.
You want to put the camera on us? You want to sit over here, hon?
Do I want to be? Not really.
Hello. I hope you
Yeah.
guys enjoyed that teaching. Here we have Noble. Just so that you guys know, next week is our week, Sabbath week, so we will not have Hebrew class next week, but we will still have Digital Readers Club. If you guys want to go to Zen Garcia channel,
Yeah.
join us there. We'll be taking a week of rest, hopefully.
I need it.
And Noble's been working hard today, so he needed to take a little bit of rest while I was teaching. But he'll be back teaching week after next,
Yeah.
probably, yeah. So week after next, we'll be back here, you guys. Thank you for all your prayer requests. If you had prayer requests you didn't get to put in the chat, You can always send it to biblicalhebrewhawaii@gmail.com. I try to check that a couple times a week, and if you had any questions about the teaching or just anything, you're more than welcome to email us. But we just thank you guys for fellowshipping with us today. Honey, would you like to close us in prayer, please?
I might fall asleep. No, okay. All right. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time of teaching, Lord. I know my wife worked hard on preparing the material and sharing it with the audience. Pray, Lord, that people will understand what's been going on in history, true history, not what we've been stuffed with, the propagandas from the world, but understanding that there's a paper trail, connections to show the truth of what happened behind the scenes. So Lord, with that, we ask that you be with everyone as a part of this ministry, everyone that attends the ministry and serves on this ministry, that you would watch over and protect them, keep them safe, Lord, especially during these times when the trials and tribulations are mounting, and again, the evil one is setting forth all things against us. We praise you and glorify you. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You guys have a great week, and a big shaloha from us. We just thank you so much for joining us today as we go out with a bang with Noble's phone. And we thank you so much again for being part of our fellowship. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks, and a big shaloha from us. Do you want to say goodbye?
Shalom.
Shaloha.
Shalom.